Good afternoon, Your Excellencies, Dr. Abdullah Al-Nuaimi, Minister of Climate Change and Environment for the UAE, Dr. Yasmin Fouad, Minister of Environment, Egypt, Mr. Hans Sandy, Consul General for the Netherlands, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Unilever, I would like to extend an extremely warm welcome to all of our attendees who have joined us not just from across the region, but also from countries as far as India and the UK. My name is Priya Sarma. I am the Senior Sustainability Manager for Unilever MENA, and I will be your host for Unilever's annual Sustainable Living Plan event. It's the 8th in the UAE and the first virtually enabled one across MENA. Today's event is titled Green Recovery in MENA, Building Back Better, and it brings together a variety of stakeholders to discuss what a green recovery really means for the region and how we can use the renewed hope that a new year brings and momentum of 2021 to really build back better. We do have a full agenda today, but with a fantastic lineup of speakers, starting with the keynote speeches from our esteemed ministers from the UAE and Egypt, followed by 2 sets of questions and 2 panel discussions. We do promise to keep the timing tight, so stay with us till the end. We will also be running polls and question and answer sessions for the presentations and panel discussions, and this is where I request your active participation. To start the event, please join me in welcoming Mr. Sanjiv Kakkar, Executive Vice President for Unilever MENA. Over to you, Sanjiv.
Your Excellencies, Dr. Abdullah Nuaimi, Minister for Climate Change and Environment for the United Arab Emirates, Dr. Yasmin Fouad, Minister of Environment, Egypt, Mr. Hans Sandy, the Consul General for the Netherlands in Dubai, all my fellow speakers, panelists, and attendees. A really warm welcome to this event on behalf of Unilever. 2020, as we all know, has been a unique year, an unprecedented year, changing life as we know it. A virus has brought our world to a standstill, disrupting lives, livelihoods, communities, and businesses worldwide. However, it's also shown us clearly what the impact of our lifestyle and activities was having on the planet. As we stayed at home under the lockdown, we saw with delight videos of animals roaming the streets of major cities and towns. We saw clear skies as travel and economic activity came to a standstill, resulting in a 17% reduction in global emissions as per the World Bank. And as now most of us enter 2021 with renewed hope that we will get back to a normal, maybe a new normal, we must not forget 2 crucial lessons that we learned from the COVID-19 crisis. The health of the planet and people are closely linked. And secondly, prevention is far superior to any cure. The cost of inaction to a warming climate therefore outweighs the cost of action. And if we factor in the economic and health impacts of climate change, then the case for action becomes even more compelling. We, as Unilever, are committed to making sustainable living commonplace. That is what drives us every day. And for this reason, we wanted to start the year by bringing a group of esteemed speakers and panelists to discuss how we can make 2021 the year for building back better together. A year where we focus on making the recovery from the COVID-19 crisis the solution to the climate crisis. A year where we focus on a green recovery, not just from an environmental perspective, but also from an economic perspective. Because a green recovery strategy has a far higher economic multiplier than the alternative business as usual model, and we will share these with you later in the day. It will not only help support our ambition for a cleaner and greener environment, but a green economic recovery will bring jobs and growth. So let's use this window of opportunity for making our MENA recovery and building back better together. I would now like to call upon His Excellency, Dr. Abdullah Al-Nuaimi, UAE Minister of Climate Change and Environment, to make his keynote speech.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, it's a pleasure to join you at this important event, which addresses a topic that is on everyone's minds this year: how to recover from the negative impact of COVID-19 and how to build back better at the same time. I would like to thank Mr. Kakkar for inviting me and for leading Unilever's commitment to sustainability. In this context, I would also like to congratulate Unilever on the issue of the 8th edition of its Sustainable Living Plan. In 2019, a newly formed partnership of public and private sector entities and non-governmental organizations called Coalition Circle committed to develop a circular economy model to combat plastic and packing waste pollution in the United Arab Emirates. The objective of this coalition align with the Sustainable Development Goals and the United Arab Emirates National Sustainable Production and Consumption Plan. As a member of Coalition Circle and with its pledge to have the environmental footprints on its products by 2025, Unilever is a role model for private sector that is a key driver of the green recovery, the theme of today's event. The United Arab Emirates government has allocated a long-term recovery package to accelerate the transition of the green economy and digital economy with focus on strategic areas, including renewable energy, electric cars, smart cities, circular economy, artificial intelligence, blockchain, 3D printing, robotics, and biotechnology. Integrating green growth into our post-COVID-19 development strategy can enable us to achieve a resilient, inclusive, sustainable, and efficient recovery. With digitalization reshaping the global economy, our country's intention to capitalize on this trend will enable it to become a regional leader in the field. We have already got a head start owing to our advanced digital infrastructure and the adoption of the United Arab Emirates Artificial Intelligence Strategy, the first of its kind in the region. Sustainable finance is another pillar of green economy. The scale of the investment required is well beyond the capacity of the public sector alone. Therefore, the United Arab Emirates is currently finalizing the sustainable finance framework to step up cooperation between the public and private sectors and channel capital towards climate resilient and sustainable investment. A major opportunity in this regard is food security, one of our priority areas for green recovery. The pandemic has highlighted the need for a stable food supply chain and reducing dependence on exports. Despite the limitations of our agricultural sector, we are seeing promising innovations, especially from our young people who are passionate to advance sustainable agriculture through cutting-edge technologies and innovative business model. As part of our recovery plans, we are also actively promoting the implementation of circular economy principles with the aim of moving away from unsustainable consumption and production patterns and preserve our natural resources for future generation. To achieve this objective, we have developed a national circular economy policy that targets the adoption of circular economy concept in 4 priority areas: green infrastructure, sustainable transportation, sustainable manufacturing, and sustainable food production and consumption. The policy is undergoing the approval process of our leadership. In addition, we are reviewing the United Arab Emirates Green Agenda 2015-2030 that seeks to consolidate the country's green growth efforts in different sectors. In light of COVID-19, we are reassessing the effectiveness of its programs and identifying areas of improvement to support our green recovery. Despite the challenging times, our country remains steadfast in its commitment to building back better. However, a successful green recovery requires a collective efforts from federal and local government entities, the private sector, and the general public, and depends on continued cooperation of all stakeholders across all sectors. Only if we work together, we can improve resource efficiency, mitigate the negative impact of climate change, and support the development of environmental goods and services with the active participation of the private sector. Ladies and gentlemen, we have just said goodbye to 2020, and I think you will all agree with me that it was a most unusual year. Let us welcome 2021 with a new hope and a new determination, not only to defeat the deadly virus, but to turn this challenge into opportunities, to come out of this crisis stronger than ever. With a positive outlook, we will continue to reinforce the role of the green economy as a cornerstone of COVID-19 recovery, and we hope that our experience can serve as a source of inspiration for the region. In closing, I wish you all productive participation in today's activities and look forward to the outcomes of the panel discussions. I would also like to invite you to attend the virtual Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week that will run from January 18th to 21st and is open to the public with registration now live. I hope to see you all there. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Dr. Nuaimi, for extremely heartening and motivating words. Before I invite our next presenter, we would like to run a small poll. You should soon be seeing the question that we're looking for an answer to on your screens. And the question really is, does climate change have economic and social impacts? You can enter your answer in the box at the bottom of your screens. Yeah. While you're doing so, I would just also like to bring to your attention that we will be taking a question. We will be taking questions at the end of this session. I would therefore urge you to start putting in your questions to our presenter as soon as you can, rather than waiting till the end of the session. And without any further ado, I would now like to invite our next speaker. Ms. Akanksha Khatri, Head of Nature Action Agenda from the World Economic Forum. Akanksha is going to be sharing with us key highlights and insights from the World Economic Forum report titled The Future of Nature and Business. Over to you, Akanksha.
Your Excellencies Dr. Abdullah bin Mohammed Belhaif Al-Nuaimi and Dr. Yasmin Fuad, panelists and presenters. Thank you for inviting the World Economic Forum and me to present on this topic of green recovery, building back better. Ralph Waldo Emerson, the 19th century American essayist and poet, once remarked, "We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children." So I greatly appreciate that this event, Unilever, and the UAE government have put such emphasis on the next generation, the youth. In my presentation today, I will share both the risks of nature loss, which have come to such stark light in the past year, but also share some insights on opportunities that a nature-positive pathway holds for us. The decisions we take today will lock us in for the next decade. It is therefore critical that we ask ourselves, what world do we want to have in 2030? We start on that journey today. For those of you who may not be as familiar with the World Economic Forum, we are an international organization for public-private cooperation. We are headquartered in Geneva, Switzerland, with offices in China, Japan, and the USA. And now through our network of Center for Fourth Industrial Revolution, we have the opportunity to engage more countries than ever before, including the UAE. In addition to having a Center for Fourth Industrial Revolution, UAE also has had a long-standing partnership with the World Economic Forum as the host of the annual Global Future Council Summit, which has now existed for over 10 years and can arguably be called the biggest brainstorm in the world, which exists to talk about various topics with a future long-term horizon on multidisciplinary subjects. We believe that the economy is embedded within the society, which in turn is embedded within the biosphere. As such, to think that we can pursue economic growth without consideration for people and planet is untenable. Over the past year, we set out to rethink our economic models and come up with a business and economic case for safeguarding nature. Not only because it is the right thing to do from a moral and a conscious point of view, but because it makes economic sense. And this was super critical to be able to take the issue beyond the environmental circles alone and to make it more mainstream. We therefore decided to look at frameworks that businesses are more familiar with, such as risks, opportunities, and financing. The first report, the Nature Risk Rising Report, was released in January of 2020 on the heels of the World Economic Forum's Global Risks Report, which identified that the biggest issues that people are concerned about are actually environmental. More than half of the world's GDP is moderately or highly dependent on nature. And therefore, to talk about the environment is not only an issue for environmental ministers or sustainability departments, but at the core and heart of businesses. The second report, which was released in July of 2020, entitled The Future of Nature in Business, identified that by shifting towards nature-positive pathways, we can create $10.1 trillion of business opportunities and approximately 400 million jobs by 2030. The third report, which is currently underway, will look at how do we unlock finance for a net zero and nature positive world by 2030. Over the past 70 years, humanity has seen significant boost in economic growth and human development indicators like reduction in poverty and mortality rates. Many have called this period as the Great Acceleration. However, it is no surprise today that this period of great acceleration has come at a severe cost to the planet within which our economy operates. The question being raised today is if it is possible to have infinite growth on a finite planet. There is a fundamental shift required in our model of economic growth and human prosperity, which is not extractive but regenerative. Economists often look at the measure of material productivity, which in the past years actually has stagnated, meaning that any growth in global output today is linked with material extraction. It is therefore no surprise that we have more than 1 million species at risk of extinction due to human activity. COVID-19 and the ensuing slowdown gives us an unprecedented opportunity for a great reset of how we as humans can learn to operate within our planetary boundaries and ensure that every growth aspect has both people and planet at its anchor and its center. Our research shows that 3 socioeconomic systems alone are responsible for almost 80% of nature loss, which is food, land, and ocean use, infrastructure in the built environment, and energy and extractives. Or simply put, how we produce and consume, how we build the modern life, and how we power our lifestyles is responsible for rapid decline of nature. For the first time in human history, we as humans are altering the planet and its delicate balance. Many have called this the era of the Anthropocene. But all is not doom and gloom. We do have an opportunity for a green recovery, to take decisions today that will set us on a path of net zero carbon emissions and a nature positive world. The 3 systems that we identified, which are clearly responsible for nature loss, but flipping the coin, also have the most to gain from safeguarding nature because their business depends on it. We've identified that 15 systemic transitions across these 3 systems can create $10.1 trillion of business opportunities and 395 million jobs. Now, this is a critical piece as both governments and businesses are rethinking strategies for a post-COVID world. And sustainability can often be seen as an additional burden or a factor that slows down growth and job creation. We would argue, however, that moving towards a nature-positive economy is in fact more resilient to future shocks and therefore sets the basis for growth, job creation, and human prosperity, which is much more stable. I just want to be able to take all of us through certain key transitions, which will be important in each of these socioeconomic systems. The first one, of course, is what is it that we do with our land? How do we choose to restore land without actually expanding the land use for different uses such as agriculture? The second is where we choose to actually do agriculture to feed the growing population. What are the methods of agriculture that we are investing in? Unilever, for example, as part of the World Economic Forum's Champions for Nature community, is really committed to advancing regenerative agriculture. But it's not only a question of land, it's also a question of healthy oceans. Because today, a huge amount of the protein as well as indigenous population dependency is on oceans. 1 in every 3rd fish that is produced today or which reaches the market is unsustainably fished. So let's think about it collectively for land and marine. The other piece is understanding how is our relationship with forest. Oftentimes we get so caught up with agriculture and food system that we forget that so many of our commodities, both in our diets as well as in our lifestyles, come from forest. A few examples would, of course, be cocoa, coffee, pulp, paper, and then now increasingly soy. And then the last 2 important points are, one, looking at planet-compatible diets, and the other is making sure that we have sustainable supply chains. There is one transition that I would like to pick up, which makes the case of why a nature-positive pathway is more profitable, resilient, and sustainable. My reason for picking up this transition was also how it relates to both the audience of this meeting, but then also the youth broadly. And this is on sustainable consumption. So where are we today? it's quite shocking today that while the animal products only provide 18% of our calories, 80% of the farmland is actually used for feeding the animals that in turn feed us. So by any measure of smart use of land, I think we are not doing very well. Similarly, if you recognize how much of the food waste exists today, and whether that food waste is also a question of societal and geographic equity or not. So just as a stat, consumers in rich nations waste up to 115 kilograms of food per capita in 1 year. Now just compare it to consumers in sub-Saharan Africa or South Asia. That falls down from 115 to between 6 to 11 kilograms. So there is a very stark equity issue that we should be looking at here, in addition to just pure environmental thing as well. So we can go on and also recognize that it's not only about what we consume in terms of food, but also in terms of textile and fashion. It's quite shocking that almost one garbage truck of textiles is landfilled or burned every second. And this will only change, or we will get to where we want to be by 2030 if we have to be nature positive, if we start looking at textiles and apparel and fashion, not just as use and throw, but something that lasts longer. So that requires both in terms of design, material, but also our habits of recycling and upcycling our clothes. And then the second important piece that we as individuals can do, both in terms of what we consume, but also what we signal to our brands, is what is it that we choose to eat. If we just shift 20% of the global calorie consumption, and one could argue like how much of it is going to be in the developed world, we could save cropland, which is equal to 2 to 3 times the landmass of United Kingdom. So it's not about completely going vegan or vegetarian, but also recognizing in a week, could you actually just have meatless Mondays, or could you just reduce your consumption of animal produce maybe in 1 or 2 meals a week? So those are just some of the ideas that we can do individually as consumers, but through that also signal to businesses who are paying attention. And for businesses, it is also about looking at its new business opportunities. I think many people are looking at going vegetarian, and businesses are realizing that alternative proteins could capture 10% of the global meat market by 2030, which was less than 1% in 2017. So things like meatless burgers or fake meat, it's really going to be on an upward horizon. But it's not just what we produce and consume, it is also about how we produce and consume, because a big chunk of the food waste happens actually in the process. So there are enough and more new businesses which are coming up who are using fourth industrial revolution technologies like AI, smart data, etc., to reduce waste. One such venture called Winnow actually uses AI to provide chefs with data and has been proven to actually reduce 20% of wastage and increasing the profit of companies and chefs and kitchen. Similarly, moving away from food and agriculture, the other piece is looking at how do we extract rare earth minerals, as well as it becomes extremely important because if we are moving towards more renewable energy, that also means that we will be requiring more minerals and metals. These are the things that exist in your computers, in your mobile phones, and they really require us to shift the way we think about them from design all the way up till the recycle of the product. And again, just deep diving a little bit into this space, and the reason I chose this is also because the UAE government over the past year has been pioneering significant work on circular economy. It is a partner with the Platform for Circular Economy and with the World Economic Forum launched a Scale 360 program, which aims to boost an innovation ecosystem for circular economy. So just take an example of your mobile phone alone. How many minerals actually just exist when we decide to discard your mobile phones? Some would argue that if we could just collect all the discarded mobile phones, that would be enough to require us to not have to dig the earth as much. So there are also new business opportunities that exist in this space beyond mobile phones, also in vehicles and automotive industry, which, as many people would realize, is one which is a great generator of jobs in any economy, but also one which is a marker of an economic growth broadly at a macroeconomic indicator. So by looking at the designing vehicles which are easier to collect, take apart, and then recycle, we could be saving up to $870 billion per year by 2030. And lastly, I think this is a transition which would stand true for many of us. During COVID, we realized that what we were craving were more and more green and natural spaces and not concrete jungles. And therefore, the way we share and spare nature becomes extremely critical. How we design our cities, how compact we design them so we actually spare nature for wildlife is extremely crucial. And then start to think about nature as infrastructure. Nature actually provides great infrastructure against shocks of disaster, floods, etc. So instead of having to necessarily build a wall, could we actually support mangroves, support embankments around the seashores, which is a green-gray infrastructure business opportunities. So again, like how we build our cities, how we choose to live in them, have a huge impact on how we share and spare with nature. There are two factors which are critical when it comes to catalyzing action for a nature-positive economy. And those are policy and financing and also technology. So maybe not 2, 3. And I think when it comes to financing, it's very common to hear that, oh, we don't have money right now, or we do not have the finances to invest in this. If anything, COVID has shown us is with the right political will, with the right business acumen and commitment, we can put the money on things that matter. So as per our study, we require $2.7 trillion to make this transition in the next decade. How does this compare to just $2.2 trillion, which were announced by only one country, the US of A, in 1 month of March of 2020 to fight COVID? So I think the question is less about whether the money exists or not. The question is, how do we make nature-positive business models more investable? And then how do we ensure that we are thinking about it more creatively and using technology? Fourth industrial revolution technologies have fundamentally shifted the game in every sphere. How we hail a taxi, how we choose to share our medical data, and how we choose to even just communicate with each other. Why is it then, when it comes to environmental goals, we are still stuck in 19th century? We cannot solve 21st century problems with 19th century solutions. We have to be able to get along with the times. As per our study, most of the transitions have technology either as a key driver or as an enabler. And ensuring that we have a more future-oriented outlook as progressive economies and countries such as UAE does, we really can make sure that we are building for the future and for the future generation. And just lastly, I'd like to say that the future is already here. It is just not evenly distributed. How we choose to invest today will determine the life that we have in 2030 and beyond. So let's trigger a revolution for a nature-positive economy. Thank you.
Thanks, Akanksha, for an extremely enlightening presentation that really brought forth very strongly this codependence between nature and economic growth. However, just stay with me for a second. Before we get into the Q&A with you, I'd just like to request for the poll results. So the question that we had run was, does climate change have economic and social impacts? And 100% of the attendees who answered said yes. Yeah. not surprising, but I'd just like to stick here for a minute. Your presentation really highlighted, the impact of climate change on business as well as the opportunities that exist if they were to go nature positive. I just want you to change, and how does it really increase this divide in terms of inequality?
Great. Thanks for that question. And it's very heartening to see that 100% of the people who responded to the poll agree. Yes, it's true that the report and the work that we did was more focused on the economic side because that's the actors or group of actors that we were looking to influence. But I do want to say in two ways. First of all, by just looking at it as an environmental and economic agenda alone, we cannot get to the results that we want. It's very critical to anchor it also in the topic of social equity if we have to achieve the goals that we want to achieve. And the second is if we just purely look at what has happened during COVID. Now, one could argue that the reason COVID happened is because our rampant growth and just using more land than ever before, which means that we are sparing less land for wildlife. And therefore, there is so much more of a spillover from wildlife diseases into the human activities. So that's just one way of seeing why this happened. But if you look at just the impact of what it has for different socioeconomic groups in any country or globally, more people in the higher income groups have access to better nutrition, better healthcare, better ability to even just go into nature for a respite, right? But when it comes to people in the lower income group, there is a lot more fear as well as insecurity for jobs, their livelihoods. So they don't have the luxury to be sitting at home waiting it out just because there is a virus out there. So I think the virus has shown us that any impact on which comes from the environmental side affects people very differently in different socioeconomic groups. So the discussion about equity is really at the heart of this. And a second example is, of course, also migration. So if you look at climate-induced migration, which is happening from many countries in sub-Saharan Africa, and many of them coming into Europe and other regions as well, this is impacting the most poor and vulnerable sections of the society. So let's recognize that social equity issues are at the heart of whatever we try to do for a net zero nature positive economy.
Excellent. Excellent. So we've got some questions that are coming in for you. Let me take this first one, which asks, how would increasing the efficiency of the livestock industry and also consumption really reduce the risk of contribution of the industry on the metrics?
Great question, because again, poultry and livestock as an industry sometimes gets forgotten, but we should look at the stark number that today more amount of agriculture to feed animals than to feed humans. So we are really using our land in a not so intuitive way, that we are doing more agriculture to create feed for animals than for humans. So by improving efficiency for livestock and poultry, it has a direct impact on our goals for climate change, land degradation, and biodiversity loss. So that's one, of course, looking at just the practices themselves and moving more towards organic, moving more towards free range definitely has an impact rather than just looking at industrial poultry activities. And the second is recognizing that there is definitely a shift in consumption patterns. And when I say about consumption, let's also recognize that it's not the consumer alone who decides what will be put on the plate. I think businesses and macroeconomic factors equally do so. The price of eggs, meat, and milk has significantly dropped in the last few years. And the reason for that is that we are negative externalities on the environment. So we are only purely looking at what we as humans create, but not look at what this is that the nature is providing. So I think through market signals, both in terms of consumption demand, but also businesses have an opportunity to influence that consumption through coming up with new product lines.
Great. So another key question, and especially with regards to sustainability. So what the measurement of impact of companies, be it on the people, planet, has. What would it take to have some sort of a universally accepted set of measures and metrics to assess impact?
Great. I did lose you a little bit over there, but just to double check that you are looking more at metrics for corporates.
Metrics, yes, metrics for corporates that are kind of consistent, across the board and don't take up too much of resources.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. So it is true, I think more people are familiar with climate. So climate scientists, as well as the Paris Agreement, decided for this 1.5 and then later 2-degree pathway, which was then driven into what does it mean for companies who have now increasingly been committing to this whole net zero target by, say, 2050, 2060. Similarly, for all other planetary boundaries beyond just climate change, there is an initiative called Science-Based Targets Network, which is looking at how can companies actually look at science at the top and bring it to their sector and company level. So I think it is about looking at what the science is telling us and seeing how companies can actually contribute to targets of climate change and use. A methodology which is commonly accepted, and I could not agree more with you, Priya, is sustainability should not and cannot be a burden on a company's resources. It needs to be mainstreamed in every activity, and the targets have to be more clear rather than complex, that you don't need to create a separate department in the company which is only doing metrics and targets. So I think Science-Based Targets Network, if anybody is interested, can go online and look for it, and that is providing a methodology.
Thanks. There's just one last question that I'd go to, and and I think it's a great one at a personal level. What is the one thing that you'd advise we can do at a personal level today in our daily lives to really make some sort of an impact? So if there's one piece of advice you'd give, what would that be?
It's something I do personally as well, is really watch out what you consume and how you consume. So I think that's, as an individual, we can really make a huge difference and send a signal to corporates, is what we consume and how we consume will make a huge difference to this planet.
Thanks, Akanksha. So thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate all your effort. And let's move on then. I'd now like to invite Sanjiv Kakkar, Executive Vice President, Unilever MENA, Turkey, Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus, to speak a little bit about Unilever and its action towards ensuring a healthy planet. But before we start, we do want to run another poll question, and if we could please have it up. So the question really is, are corporates like Unilever taking action to address issues that impact the health of the planet and people? Again, you can put in your answers in the chat box at the bottom. And while you're doing so, I'd like to again remind everybody that at the end of Sanjiv's presentation, we will be taking questions. So please feel free to start putting them in at the earliest. I'd now like to invite Sanjiv in to make his presentation. Sanjiv, over to you.
Thank you, Priya. And I'm really happy to be able to share with you all today on this call our journey as Unilever towards making sustainable living commonplace. Next slide. Unilever is a global company, and I'm sure that many of you are familiar with the brands, some of the biggest brands that you see over here on the screen, and do consume them on a regular basis as you go through your day. We have a huge impact across the world. 2.5 billion people use our products daily. And that means that we have to be careful about the patterns of consumption that happen globally and its impact on the environment. They consume over 400 plus Unilever brands. We have a significant scale as a company globally with a 52 billion euro turnover in 2019. We operate across 190 countries, either directly or through trading operations. And we employ over 155,000 people. So it's a company with significant scale, significant impact, and therefore it's crucial that we are conscious of our impact on the environment. We have always had a very strong commitment to sustainability. From the beginning, our founder, Sir William Lever, almost over 120 years ago, aimed for Unilever to have a purpose beyond just profits by making cleanliness commonplace, his own words, to lessen work for women, to foster health and contribute to personal attractiveness, that life may be more enjoyable and rewarding for the people who use our products. Now, this is so relevant today, and it has been our guiding star as we've gone through the years. So in 2010, we launched the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan, also known as the USLP. And this was a game changer for us and for others. Back then, we really had no clue about how we're going to achieve all the ambitious targets that we set for ourselves. But we've gone ahead on that journey. And this wasn't just a sustainability plan, it was a plan for a successful, sustainable business. Our vision is to grow our business whilst decoupling our environmental footprint from our growth and increasing our positive social impact. This is because we believe that companies which address both the needs of the environment and the concerns of citizens are the companies that will prosper over the long term. Our Unilever Sustainable Living Plan has 3 goals, 3 big ones. First is to help more than 1 billion people improve their health and well-being, half the environmental footprint of our products in the making and use of our products, and enhance the livelihoods of millions of people as we grow our business. And here we would focus really on 2 areas: fairness in the workplace and opportunities for women, amongst many others. Our progress in 2010 and 2019 is what I'd like to cover off on this slide. In 2010, we had committed to help over 1 billion people to improve their health and well-being. By the end of 2019, we have reached over 1.3 billion people through our programs on hand washing, safe drinking water, sanitation, oral health, self-esteem, skin healing across all our brands. Our second area was to really halve the environmental footprint of our products as we grow our business. And here we've looked at a few of the really big areas, our greenhouse gas emissions. So we are committed to becoming carbon positive in our operations by 2030. That means 100% of our energy must come from renewable sources. And compared to 2008, our CO2 emissions from our factories have fallen by 65% per ton of production. And in 2019, 85% of all our grid electricity used in our manufacturing operations came from renewable sources. As far as water is concerned, and we have dramatically cut back our water consumption per ton product over this period. And very importantly, on waste, we took a pledge to make all our manufacturing sites zero waste to landfill. And we achieved significant reduction, therefore, in the amount of waste that is going into landfills. It has been brought down to zero from all our manufacturing sites. And finally, we have a big goal that we would aim to enhance the livelihoods of millions of people as we grow our business. One of our biggest commitments over here is fairness in the workplace. And we are implementing the UN principles on business and human rights throughout our operations, as well as with our suppliers. And we expect our suppliers to follow the codes that we do. We believe that women empowerment is crucial to overall economic growth in the communities that we operate in, and therefore we are committed to advancing this. We have improved our own gender balance within our organization, and today 51% is the proportion of female managers in our management team. We are globally helping almost close to 2.3 million women access through initiatives that are aimed at promoting their safety, developing their skills, expanding economic opportunities for them. And within our business, of course, through our Lamplighter program, we ensure that 81,000 employees have got access to programs leading to better health. Next slide, please. We remain committed to really addressing the climate change issues because pressures on our planet have reached truly a crisis point. We want to play our part in tackling climate change, reduce the depletion of natural resources. It also, for instance, for us, quite honestly, it makes eminent sense, business sense, to reduce our risk on our supply chain by building sustainable sources for our raw materials, to cut our costs on packaging materials, and this sustainability leads to higher manufacturing efficiencies as well. We hope to appeal to more consumers through brands that are sustainable and purpose-led. So there is a strong business economic sense to driving our sustainability agenda. We aim to continue to address the use of disposable plastics, water scarcity, energy use, nature degradation, as they are all intricately connected to climate change. And since the launch of our USLP program in 2010, we have made some significant and large climate commitments, which I'd like to touch upon. We are committed, first of all, to keeping our plastic packaging in the loop and out of the environment. As from a purely business perspective, plastics is a valuable material that can be reused endlessly. So if managed well, it is not harmful to the environment. And in 2017, we committed to making all of our packaging reusable, recyclable, or fully compostable. And we will do so by 2025. In October of 2019, we further enhanced this commitment to saying that we will actually collect more plastic from the environment than we put into the environment. That's a big goal. It's a difficult goal, but we are committed to making that happen. We have made good progress since then. We have, in the MENA region, 70% of our packaging is now recycle ready. We have also begun partnerships with a lot of local players in order to ensure that we increase the availability of post-consumer recycled resin, which we would then use in our own packaging. And currently we are at 4%. And we are working really hard to make sure that we reach our goal of 25% of PCR use in our own packaging by 2025. We are using alternative materials to plastic where appropriate. like our new recyclable paper-based ice cream tubs. We continue to test new business models for refillable, reusable packaging such as loop. And all of these are aimed at reducing our plastic impact on the environment. Further, with the aim of actually changing shopper behavior, we are deploying reverse vending machines in various locations within the UAE as well. And we are working with a lot of local governments across the MENA region to help drive the concept of circular economy. We've signed recently a MOU with BIA here in the UAE to begin the development of a local source of PCR. Now, we have made some big climate commitments. We have committed that by 2039, we will have net zero emissions from all our products, from sourcing to sale. We aim to build a deforestation-free supply chain by 2023. And this is a big task because it can have a massive impact on climate change. We want to empower a new generation of farmers and smallholders. We are building a regenerative agricultural code for all our suppliers. And our intention is to make all our product formulations biodegradable by 2030 and really work towards implementing 100 what we call water stewardship programs to help conserve water in the environment also 2030. Next slide, please. We have, in September 20, made some additional climate commitments. As you all know, we are a big producer of home care products, washing powders, liquids, home cleaning products, dishwash liquids, etc. And we have launched what we call the Clean Future project, which is an innovation strategy that will fundamentally change the way that our cleaning and laundry products are created, manufactured, and packaged. And at the heart is our ambition to replace 100% of the carbon derived from fossil fuels in our products, formulations, with renewable or recycled carbon by 2030. We have also launched the Future Foods Initiative. Can we click on? Yeah. To really transition towards plant-friendly food. In the previous presentation, you heard about the huge impact that meat and consumption of meat has on the environment and the amount of agricultural land that is devoted to actually feeding livestock. We are pushing forward with initiatives on healthier plant-based meat and dairy alternatives to reduce the environmental impact on the food chain. And we are committed at the same time to making all our food products healthy through lower calorie, lower salt, and lower sugar across our wide range of food products and ice creams. Next slide, please. Additionally, what we are aiming to do is to begin to use technology to end deforestation across the supply chain, particularly in the cultivation of crops like palm oil and soy. To ensure that the land used to grow crops such as palm oil, fruit, soy isn't connected to deforestation, we are reimagining our approach to traceability by launching a pilot with Orbital Insight, a US tech company that specializes in geospatial analytics. And this will allow us to get a much clearer picture of where harvested crops are coming from and address possible issues related to deforestation and take swift action through our supply chain. Furthermore, on the 1st of January 2020, we achieved a landmark across all our factories and offices globally. And we are now using 100% renewable energy from the grid. And we are going further than this now to make sure that we get our entire energy from renewable sources. Our goal is to become entirely carbon neutral across the business before 2030. A really ambitious goal. I'd like to now move forward and touch upon some of the key achievements that we've seen across the MENA region between 2008 and 2020. Despite an increase in production across the region, we have achieved a reduction across all our environmental KPIs. We've reduced our CO2 emission by close to 80%, our water consumption by 13% per ton. We now send all our non-hazardous waste we do not send any of our non-hazardous waste to the landfills anymore. And in 2015, we had announced our ambition to become carbon positive. And as I shared with you, we now get 100% of our electricity from green sources, from certified green sources. A few highlights here. As I said, all sites in MENA are now zero waste to landfill. Our Dubai personal care factory, which was set up in 2016, has the largest private sector solar park, and it delivers 2 megawatts of electricity per year against a 9 megawatt requirement. And in September 2019, 100% of the electricity used in our UAE office and manufacturing sites was sourced from renewable sources via an agreement with DEWA. Can we move forward, please? As we exit out of COVID, it's really important that governments and companies should join hands and focus on a few key targets. First, set a science-based target for emissions and reductions in line with the 1.5 degree temperature change ambition of the Paris Agreement. Second, we must commit to switching to renewable energy across, like we're doing so in Unilever. Third, there must be a price on carbon so that we incentivize companies to make the shift. We must support the development of natural climate solutions, some of which you heard in the previous presentation as well. And finally, and very importantly, we must eliminate deforestation from commodity supply chains. This can have a huge impact on climate, and corporates have a massive role to play in making this happen. Moving forward, in closure, what I'd like to really say is that we believe in Unilever that we can't do this alone, or a few cannot do this alone, or a few governments cannot do this alone, or a few NGOs cannot do this alone, but everybody must come together and begin to drive the transformational change, begin to think and work differently. This means that we need to partner with each other and build collaboration across a whole range of players, from governments to NGOs to big businesses to startups. And it is for this very reason that we are constantly engaged with a number of stakeholders in forums such as this and directly as well, to initiate discussions and kickstart many activities where, hopefully we can translate some of those into big positive action. And imagine what we can do if we all come together to really initiate and achieve a full green MENA economic recovery. That's what I had wanted to share with you. And I would be now really happy to take any questions. So Priya, if you can come on.
Yeah. Thanks, Sanjiv. But before we get into the questions, we do have some really interesting ones out there. Before we do that, I'd just like to ask for the poll results. Okay, so it seems like the majority, that's almost 78% of our respondents, did say that corporates like Unilever are taking action to address issues that do impact the health of the climate and the people. There are 22% who don't agree. And I think, like Sanjiv said, what we're doing companies like Unilever are taking initial steps, taking responsibility for our own footprint. And I think, like Sanjiv, you said, there's still a lot to be done. We're just out of our journey. So, yeah.
What I'd like to
let's
say
get
is, I certainly like the fact that a large percentage said that they believe we are doing good work. I also like the fact that there are about a fifth of people who will constantly doubt and will push us in the right direction. So we need both. We need the encouragement and we need the push. So keep doing that.
Thank you. And yes, the push will come from our consumers and the young people. So getting into the questions, the first one I'd like to send across to you, Sanjiv, is that Unilever seems to have made a lot of climate commitments. Can you explain to us what really is the impact of climate change in a business like yours?
Look, climate change is really wreaking havoc, and you have forest fires across Amazon, California, Indonesia. Most recently Australia. You have floods. All of this shows us how fragile our environment is and the ecosystem is with the changing climate. We are seeing frequent extreme weather events across the globe, and this has a devastating impact on our businesses, on people, and of course on the environment. Climate change, more specifically, what happens is that climate change brings about a huge amount of volatility in our raw material supply chains. Our products are used, as I said, by about 2.5 billion people across the world, and that's about a third of the planet. We are one of the largest food and refreshment businesses. We therefore use a very wide variety of raw materials sourced from all over the world. And extreme climate events disrupt that supply chain, and we have seen the impact of that disruption on our business. They also negatively impact our ability to transport our products. They negatively impact logistics and impede our ability to do just-in-time inventory management. They raise the cost of moving goods. Regulatory restrictions on goods come about because some governments are worried about the impact of climate change. That can lead to an increase in cost. And all of this will ultimately impact our ability to serve our consumers at the lowest possible cost. So we as a company believe that it is in our interest, and it is actually in the interest of the entire corporate world, to step forward and deal with climate change, because what is good for the environment will be good for the business.
Excellent, Sanjiv. So there's another set of two questions which are similar, so I'll kind of try to combine them and shorten. So the first one really says that all the examples that Sanjiv is giving sound amazing, but also sound extremely expensive. So how are we working sustainability into our business plans to account for profitability?
Very good question. And let me be honest and upfront that sustainability by itself is not sustainable, if I may say that. Sustainability, when combined with a strong business case that also helps businesses to deliver to their other stakeholders, the shareholders who demand a return on their investment, is when sustainability will become sustainable in the long run. And we have seen now, as we have begun to work our supply chains, as we have begun with sustainability initiatives, it makes a lot of sense to use less energy per ton of product. It makes a lot of sense to use less water per ton of product. All of these actually lead to less, a lesser cost that is built into our products. Secondly, and very importantly, a key leg of our sustainable living plan is purpose-driven brands. And we have found that our purpose-driven brands, on an average over the last decade, have grown almost 60% faster than brands that still do not have purpose enshrined in them. So consumers are voting with their feet, and they are moving towards brands that have purpose that they feel do good to the environment and do good to society. So on the one hand, sustainability does lead to a reduction in cost, as we are seeing. And we have the last decade or so, over 300 to 400 million euros worth of cost reductions we have seen in our business. And it leads to the push behind brands that are purpose-driven and consumers voting for these brands, which helps us to power business growth. So the two really work to create the mantra that sustainability is actually good for business and good for society.
Thanks, Sanjiv. So the next question is the fact that a lot of waste or recycling waste was at least being sent to Asia to be dumped in landfills or oceans in a kind of a fraudulent recycling schemes. What is Unilever plan on doing to ensure that our diverted waste is actually recycled within our region?
Yeah. So look, we, as I said, we don't send anything to the landfill anymore from our factories, barring hazardous waste for which there are special protocols for treatment. All the non-hazardous waste, we ensure moves towards partners who then either reuse it or they recycle it, or that waste is destroyed in a way that is not harmful to the environment. So we do an end-to-end monitoring of what is happening to the waste and how is it being ultimately either consumed as somebody else's raw material or is finally being degraded, made compostable, or is finally being destroyed but released into the environment in a way that is not harmful at all to the environment, in a form that is not harmful to the environment.
Anything then on the packaging waste from the consumer end? Any plans on that?
No, that's a big topic, quite honestly. And it is where Unilever has made a big commitment, which is that we will collect more from the environment than we put in. So we are going to tackle this on many fronts. One is we are going to work with partners to ensure we start collecting the waste back. So this can be seen already in some places. We've got these reverse vending machines that encourage consumers to bring back their packaging material and put it into the vending machines, which we then collect, and then it goes into recycling for reuse. That's a big initiative that is being rolled out. We also have significant initiatives around participation in the circular economy through, as I shared with you, the pilots that we are doing on Loop, which is how do you make sure that the products are reused. You move towards an era where consumers actually go back with their packaging, and we just set up refilling stations, as we've begun to do in a number of countries, and they refill the detergent, the liquid, and go back home with their packaging. So there are a number of initiatives which are currently in pilot phase, which will then be scaled up as we begin to see the viability, which are all aimed at making sure that we build and participate actively in a circular economy. And we collect back from the environment much more than we are actually putting in.
So just one last question, which is regarding social sustainability, which is crucial, and Unilever seems to have done a lot, whether with employees or suppliers. What are Unilever's plans to empower youth and SMEs?
Yeah, good question. We have an extended supply chain, and we have an extended distribution and logistics chain going forward into the market. And therefore, we have enormous opportunities where youth can participate in these chains. To give you an example, which will illustrate what I mean. So for instance, in Egypt, we have a big program that we call Safir, which we're very proud of, where we actively encourage youth to carry our products into the rural hinterland of Egypt. And they link into our distributors, and then they, as micro entrepreneurs, take on the task of carrying these into the rural hinterland of Egypt and ensure distribution of product. And that's how they also earn a pretty significant livelihood. We have a very big program called Shakti in India, where we have over 50 to 60,000 women who are actively engaged in the distribution down into the vast hinterland of India of Unilever, and again acting as micro entrepreneurs, where they buy and then they go out, they explain our products, what these products do, and then they ensure that there is a continued distribution and supply chain of these products into the rural hinterland. Just two examples of where we are working closely with youth and enabling them to become micro entrepreneurs, which enables them to earn a good and strong economic livelihood.
Thank you, Sanjiv. Thanks. There was a comment which kind of complemented your presentation, so thank you very much. And having said that, we'll now move on to the next session. Okay. So building green and resilient economies is really a very ambitious vision, and one that can be made possible only by ensuring that a variety of stakeholders are part of that process. Our first panel today brings together senior experts from the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt to share their insights on the key elements that are needed to design a green recovery plan that unites economic recovery. This panel is being moderated by Tanzid Alam, Managing Director, Earth Matters Consultancy. Tanzid, over to you now.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Priya. And excellent event so far. So I'm very happy to be moderating this very exciting panel. We have a really good lineup of speakers for you. To start the first polling question, which is, so the question is, who should take the lead in the MENA region for a green recovery? 1, government, 2, corporates, 3, individuals, 4, NGOs, or 5, all of the above. So please answer the question and we'll get back to the answer at the end. I'd also encourage all the attendees to please send in your questions through the chat box while the session is in progress and not necessarily wait till the end. We'll try and reserve about 10 minutes at the end for Q&A because I think that adds so much to these discussions. Okay, so I would now like to introduce the panelists, please. So first we have Laila Abdul-Latif, who is the Director General of Emirates Nature-WWF. She'll be joined on the panel by Khalid Al-Huraimel, who is the Chief Executive Officer of BIA, Dr. Aisha Al-Sarihi, who's a Research Associate on Climate Change and Environment with KAPSARC in Saudi Arabia, and Sara El-Battouty, who's a Senior Advisor to the President of Egypt on Sustainable Communities Development and founder of EConsult. So we have a really good lineup here. So I'm going to start first with a general question for Laila, please. So Laila, you've been, you're from the UAE, you're born and brought up here. You're really passionate about conservation issues, and your leadership of WWF in the region has been exemplary in that sense. And from your experience, how do you think we can place nature at the center of the post-COVID economic recovery in the MENA region?
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Tanzid, for your question. I'd like to first start off by congratulating Unilever for all of your efforts. It's been great to learn about all of the great initiatives that you've been implementing, and also to thank you for the invitation to participate today. And I'd also like to thank all of the fellow panelists and participants for joining today. It's a very interesting question, Tanzid, and I think one that all of us have a strong opinion on. Definitely, I believe that this year, the world essentially has witnessed how humanity's existence is really tied to nature. And the COVID-19 health crisis has demonstrated that the health of our planet directly does impact our society, our economy, and of course, our survival. And we've seen that our health isn't independent of the health of our planet. And although we can't always foresee and prevent future pandemics, what we can do essentially is to act to heal our relationship with nature. And I wholeheartedly believe and recommend that a One Health approach is the approach to follow essentially. Now, what does this really mean? So at the heart of these efforts must be the recognition that the nature agenda is also about people. It's about people's rights, it's about our well-being, it's about economic prosperity, essentially. And we must change the way we live. We must look at including how we perceive our economic growth and direct essentially COVID-19 economic stimulus packages towards initiatives which not only rescue the economy, but also address climate change, that address resource destruction and depletion and natural loss, nature loss essentially in parallel as well. As we've heard today from His Excellency, the Minister of Climate Change and Environment, the UAE government has spoken openly about the need for a green recovery and how the green economy is that high priority area for the post-COVID-19 future. Strategic investments as well are also focused on a green recovery, and therefore it is the time to collectively work together as government, private sector, the NGO sector, and of course, individuals. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Laila. I'm glad you added a new sector in that list as well, with NGOs, absolutely crucial. So, Sarah, I'd like to bring you into give your perspective on this question. You've been working in urban planning and community design and development in Egypt, but obviously there's a lot of poverty there as well. So how do you think we can place nature at the center of the post-COVID economic recovery in MENA? I think you're muted, maybe, Sarah. We can't hear you.
Hello?
There you go. Yeah, clear now.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for hosting me on this. And that's a very important question because there has been more of a discussion about making nature-based solutions and also making accessibility to these solutions more affordable so that the outreach for them can be much larger than it is today. Because I work on buildings as an architect, I see the difference between the green building economy and what is available on the market, and also having the scalability of these projects economically viable so that they can spread in developing economies is very important. So what we need to focus on for the future is that to also decentralize the process of solutions so that these solutions are not just recognized globally or by region. They're based on the challenges that every single geographic and demographic is facing. And such solutions should come out of localized innovation and localized processes so that they can be quite relevant to each country. We need that in Egypt just as much as there are efforts in Tunis and Morocco and Saudi and Emirates and everything. There's a whole analysis about urban planning cities based around the inhabitants of these cities and their futuristic needs rather than a global perspective borrowed or imposed. So that's my take on that.
Okay, if I could ask you a follow-up question on that then, Sarah, what's the one thing you'd recommend while outlining the benefits of such an approach?
Well, the first thing is that we have to look at population growth, and we have to look at forecasting climate mitigation and climate adaptation needs and how viable these forecasts are. So for instance, the Paris Agreement was based on, keeping it at 1.5, and this was the target. But we're not meeting this target because the efforts have not been, as your initial poll, they haven't been the responsibility of everyone. So the first thing we need to do is to look at the overall policies created that look at, we have young nations, we need more cities, we need more buildings, we need to look at migration patterns, and we need to look at developing communities in a way that's very, very holistic. That's the first part. The second part is to revise and revisit how our ancestors and how in culture people dealt with climate change in the built environment. There is so much value in indigenous knowledge that we need to merge with technology, with visionary work, with futuristic work, but we need to tap into this excellent resource of nature-based solutions that were there. They're there in every single culture. We just need to revisit them, because the culture then was that people were very much related to the natural environment, and it wasn't, growth at all cost without any kind of limit to nature. It was a very different value chain, and we need to look at our history and take inspiration from that.
Thank you, Sarah. Is that something you agree with, Laila, in terms of Sarah's recommendation of such an approach?
100%. I think nature-based solutions is definitely the way to go. It's also about supporting sustainable food systems that enable us to feed a growing population, again, living within the limits of our one planet, feeding a growing population without relying on agricultural deforestation and land conversion, which we know from the previous speakers as well is one of the reasons for this global pandemic. It's about stopping illegal, unregulated, and high-risk wildlife trade and consumption, but also building that sustainable relationship between people and nature through this holistic economic recovery approach, prioritizing that restoration of nature. Because if managed well and sustainably, nature does hold the key to our prosperity. And each year, around $125 trillion of ecosystem services are actually provided to the global economy. Now, this is looking at drinking water, the food that's provided by our natural ecosystems, our oceans and forests that soak up essentially carbon. So if we do manage our planet well and we manage our resources sustainably, this will hold the key to success.
Excellent. Thank you, Laila. And you really touched on some absolutely crucial issues there, which we'll have a chance to dive into in a bit more detail. But next, I'd like to ask Mr. Khalid, CEO of BIA. Thank you for joining us, Khalid. You've obviously got BIA off the ground for a number of years. We're very proud to see how quickly that's expanded. You've got plans to expand now into Saudi Arabia and I believe Egypt as well. So from your perspective of looking at the region as a whole, what do you think are the key gaps and opportunities in the MENA region for a green recovery?
Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank Unilever for inviting me here today, and it's a pleasure to be amongst a distinguished group of speakers. I believe that when we look at the world post-COVID, there's a great potential for a green recovery to enhance the resilience of our region's economy and society while increasing its ability to tackle environmental global challenges. At BIA, we believe the biggest opportunity is in focusing on sustainability and digitalization to promote a sustainable quality of life. These are the two pillars that will drive the future economy, and it drives our strategies, ventures, and operations. BIA's integrated waste management services have supported the environmental health and safety here in the UAE, and throughout 2020, our operations have gone uninterrupted because I believe that we were well prepared to cope with the crisis. I'm proud to say that we were also part of the UAE response to COVID-19 as a key player in the UAE's national disinfection program. Because of our successful track record here in the UAE, as you have said, BIA has expanded globally into KSA and Egypt last year, which goes to show that other cities in the region are recognizing the importance of environmental protection. We won major contracts in Medina and in Egypt's new administrative capital to bring effective and integrated waste management solutions to these cities and helping these cities meet their environmental sustainability goals. BIA also continued to leverage opportunities for a circular economy by maintaining on our key projects and launch new ones. For instance, we launched a new biomass facility and alternative raw material facility last July, which are critical infrastructure projects that help to achieve the UAE zero waste strategies. Also, our waste to energy facility is on track for completion in 2021 and will be the region's first waste to energy plant. This project not only reduces landfill dependency, but also diversifies the UAE alternative energy sources. We are also nearing completion of our new headquarters designed by Zahidid, which set new benchmarks for sustainability and smart buildings of the future. This building will be powered completely by renewable energy and will be the first fully AI integrated building in the region.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Khalid. And I've driven past that building before and it looks absolutely beautiful. So I'm looking forward to it opening and visiting one day, inshallah. And Dr. Aisha, last but not least, you've been, you're a real expert on climate change and environment. You were a coordinator for the T20 task force with KAPSARC last year, where we had the pleasure of working more closely together. If you were to look at the region, what do you see as the key gaps and opportunities for a green recovery here?
Okay, thank you very much, Tanzid. Thank you very much for having me in this discussion. I really enjoyed the talks so far. I think so my expertise is in the climate and environment, and indeed I agree with all the speakers in terms that as we heal from COVID-19, we also should not forget about the precious environment where we live, and this is one of the reasons why we need to pursue a green recovery. And one thing that I want to point out to when it comes to pursuing the green recovery is to look at it as a multi-sectoral process. And what does green recovery really mean? It means that we need to associate the recovery or the revival of the different economic sectors with measures that ensure the safeguarding of the environment and tackling climate change. And so how can we do that? And what are the opportunities in the MENA region? If I go back to your question. Because my expertise is in the energy sector. So in the energy sector, for example, if we dedicate investments in the renewable energy and the energy efficiency, for example, that would help in the job creation along the value chain, and it would enhance the energy security and improve the air quality in the region. And so this gives us an idea that there are social, economic, environmental benefits that we could miss if we don't pursue a green recovery. And the MENA region has many opportunities when it comes to investing in the clean energy or the renewable energy specifically, because the MENA region is one of the best regions in the world in terms of its richness in the renewable energy resources. And it also especially in the UAE, the Qatar and Saudi Arabia, we have seen how the cost of renewable have hit a record low globally. And then also when it comes to the MENA region, also climate change. So most of the economic sectors in the MENA region are vulnerable and have been already impacted by the climate change. Examples of these sectors is the agriculture, fishery, and even the tourism, the infrastructure and the oil sectors. These are vulnerable to the climate change. Therefore, as we recover from the COVID-19, it is really important to address the climate change for all of these sectors, because otherwise we could have been faced with more costs in the future if we don't address the climate change sooner than later. So these are the opportunity I wanted to highlight on so far. But if there are any questions, I would be happy to take them.
Great, thank you, Aisha. That was a really good kind of walkthrough of some of the key areas to consider. So we'll definitely be able to touch on those points a bit later on. I'd like to go to Khalid, if I may. You mentioned in your opening remarks about circular economy. So can you quantify for me the benefits of a circular waste economy for our region?
As we know, a circular economy redefines economic growth by keeping materials and resources in a continuous closed loop, allowing natural systems to regenerate and eliminating waste and pollution. Creating a circular economy offers a 4.5 trillion economic opportunity by avoiding waste, creating business growth and new jobs. BIA believes that there is significant value in waste, and we have been investing in facilities and the capabilities to achieve this transition. An example of such a facility is our material recovery facility, which is one of the largest in the Middle East with an annual capacity of over 600,000 tons. It is one of the top plants for recovery of recyclables in the region. We also have a construction and demolition waste recycling facility, which has a recovery rate of over 95% and produces recyclable products such as curbstones, interlock, and concrete aggregates. Another example, we partnered with Sharjah Cement Factory to supply alternative fuel from BIA's solid recovered fuel plant. This has resulted in 73,000 tons of waste being diverted from Sharjah's landfills and reused for industrial purposes. By having a holistic waste management strategy and advanced recycling capabilities, we have tripled Sharjah's waste diversion rate, which now stands at 76%. Once our Sharjah waste-to-energy facility is operational by the end of this year, the Emirate would become the Middle East's first zero-waste city. We look forward to replicating these successes and exporting our unique solutions to other cities in the Middle East and beyond.
Excellent, thank you, Mr. Khalid. You mentioned as well before you've got a waste-to-energy plant. Isn't waste-to-energy in conflict with the circular economy?
The waste-to-energy plant facility actually complements our efforts to move towards a circular economy. BIA has invested in several robust recycling facilities to maximize the lifespan and recovery of natural resources. So we are actually only processing non-recyclable municipal solid waste at the Sharjah waste-to-energy facility, which would otherwise be sent to landfill. It is important also to add that BIA is also exploring ways to recycle the residual ashes from the waste-to-energy process, and we are looking to recycle these ashes into durable, affordable construction material.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. It's really good to know. And then if I was to ask you, what are the 3 immediate actions that you think need to be taken to transition towards a circular economy?
One immediate action is to harness the power of technology. At BIA, we believe that investing in applying industry-leading digital technologies will support circular strategy and sustainable development. We've done that in a lot of our processes, from how we track our vehicles to how we track waste. So we invest a lot in technology. Next, I recommend that business leaders seek out partnerships in support of circular economy goals. BIA is a company actually that operates under a public-private partnership model, and we recognize that solving the region's waste challenges will require collaborative efforts. My advice is to consider partnerships with other entities that share similar values and goals to engage in co-creation and unlock value-added solutions. An example would be the Unilever and BIA MOU, which we signed in 2020, to explore collaboration and end-to-end integrated plastic recycling management system. This combines BIA's expertise and Unilever's sustainability commitments to reduce its plastic waste and create a circular economy for plastics. Another example is our partnership with Mostafa for developing waste-to-energy projects across the region. And finally, we need to focus our efforts on raising community awareness and how to participate in circular behaviors. Sustainability is a collective responsibility and requires active participation from everyone to transition towards circular models. When individuals are more aware of what circular economy entails and the impact to their lives, they will start to consider the environmental impact of their decisions.
Great, thank you. Very clear answers there, Mr. Khalid. And kind of building on this theme of business opportunities in a circular economy, Sarah, I'd like to bring you in on this. You've got an interesting perspective to share, I believe, on this. How do you start a business to contribute to a circular economy?
EConsult was Egypt's first green architecture company, and now has become the highest certified local and Middle Eastern company to achieve this. It's very easy to approach climate change and try and convince people by looking at numbers, but the more you make the relevance, the cultural relevance of buildings and challenges closer to people, the more important it is. So EConsult has achieved the first zero carbon emissions building, a completely neutral village for 120 inhabitants. It's a farm community. And one of the main issues was looking at heat and the challenges of heat in our part of the world. And so by achieving 10 degrees cooler without mechanical assistance, of course, the building is 100% powered by renewable energy, using local materials, thermal quality, and all of that. But part of the success of our projects is that we again, visit local communities and how they operate the buildings. So that's very important for us at EConsult, and we're growing. The innovation part is when we've integrated solid waste management solutions into our architecture. So we've achieved award-winning buildings that are entirely made of discarded refrigerator casings. We have 2 projects in Italy this way. We have buildings with waste wood. We have buildings that reuse old aggregate concrete and stuff like that. So in our sector, in the housing sector and the value chain, there needs to be a lot more encouragement of integrated solution to create spaces that both contribute to the built environment, contribute to cooling, which is an incredibly important aspect and challenge in our region. And secondly of all, to look good, because and to represent the cultural needs of the built environment. As a natural progression of our work, and we've been in the market for 10 years doing these buildings, we were continuously looking at the opportunities of expanding and creating another business that would cater for the interiors of the building. And so EConsult set a new company called Nuboon, and Nuboon means honest wood, basically, that takes scrap waste wood that would either be completely discarded. And in Egypt, we have a very, very, very large furniture production sector that is very sophisticated, and we import a lot of the wood that we use in our furniture market. But however, there is a system of waste management that overlooks some of the scrap waste, which are these very small pieces. And what we've done over the past 2 years is that we've revived the craftsmanship, the handmade craftsmanship, which is, beginning to lose its relevance in the workplace. And we've opened up a workshop, and this workshop takes scrap waste, upcycles it into high-end luxury furniture without using heat, which is very important in the process because we want it to be the first cradle-to-cradle certified product in the region. And successfully, we have taken the scrap waste from workshops in Egypt that are handmade, and we've exported successfully to Paris, to design boutiques in London, etc. So, and this is a natural progression because we also use some of these products into our buildings so that it's a continuous cycle. And I hope that there's a huge potential for the market to grow in the housing and building sector to integrate this. This year at the UN General Assembly, we were recognized as a model of circular economy and niche business for doing this. But obviously, the partnerships are very important, which is, as Dr. Khalid was saying, creating partnerships, opening up ideas, value chains, and creating jobs. This is where we need to have the focus.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. And actually picking up on the jobs theme, I'd like to bring Laila into the next part of this conversation, because you rightly explained about these opportunities there around new job creation. Laila, you know, WWF in the UAE, you've been working closely with youth engagement through your Connect with Nature program. What can be done? Are they asking for employment prospects of a green recovery? What do you think can be done to support that?
Thanks, Tanzid. And it was very inspiring actually to hear about the great work Sarah's been doing. Yes, we do work quite a lot with youth at Emirates Nature-WWF. And the main purpose is to understand how the youth would like to reimagine their future post-COVID-19. So what are the sorts of initiatives they'd like to be involved in? How can the government and the corporate sector support them with their interests, whether it's creating new job opportunities or even upskilling the youth in order to get them ready for that green job market, essentially. So what we had done over the course of the last few months, specifically during COVID, since we were all stuck within a virtual environment, essentially, is we ran a series of youth circles to really understand, again, how do they reimagine their future post-COVID-19? And we'd actually spoken to over 1,600 youth. So the youth circles were in discussion with key ministers of various sectors in the UAE, including His Excellency, the Minister of Economy and the Minister of Environment and Climate Change, as well as the Minister of Food Security, to really then look at identifying what are those key conservation solutions that the youth are recommending and how could they potentially adapt their own strategies to support this transition. And what was very interesting, a very interesting initiative that, statistic that came out of these youth circles was that only 2 out of 10 youth actually want life to go back to normal post-COVID-19. Because what the pandemic has demonstrated is how connected their health is to the health of the planet, which at the same time has amplified that concern for their well-being. And what was also very clear is that there is this passion, there's this drive and interest for youth to be those leaders of tomorrow, to be those leaders who are really driving that sustainable change and supporting the green economy, moving towards the green job market. Now, an opportunity, going back to your question, to rapidly encourage green jobs is to link these stimulus packages and public investments to positive action for climate and nature in line with sustainable development goals, and really incentivizing the support for climate smart, nature-based solutions, a circular economy, as Sarah and Dr. Khalid had mentioned, and sustainable livelihoods. But what's also really critical and vital is that we invest in upskilling the next generation so that they can excel in these green industries. Because again, it's not only a matter of creating that framework and creating the opportunities, we have to make sure to upskill our community along the way and really engage them and interest them in this new field of work. Now, the UAE's new economic strategy framework, as His Excellency Abdullah had mentioned earlier in the previous sessions, really focuses on these long-term stimulus packages, and it's focused on renewable energy, on electric cars, on the circular economy. But what we also realize is that various green sectors, including renewable energy and notably solar PV, can sometimes employ more people per unit of investment in energy than fossil fuel generation. And the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA, actually estimates that renewable energy could employ more than 40 million people by 2050. So it's a matter of really, again, upskilling our community, raising awareness about these key opportunities and supporting the government and the corporate sector in setting up the framework, because the interest and passion is definitely there from what we've seen throughout our youth sessions.
That's very encouraging to hear, Laila. I'm so happy to hear that. And you've actually answered the other question. You know, are we seeing a change in attitudes to the environment? And it seems like we are. So in youth, and I'm sure in the next panel we'll hear more deeply about this topic. Dr. Aisha, I'd like to bring you in here. You know, you gave us a very interesting kind of overall picture for the region of some of the challenges around climate change and possibly opportunities. If you were to recommend one main policy that can help drive a green recovery in this region to prioritize climate change, what would that be?
Right. So I don't think there's one main policy. There's no silver bullet to make climate change or climate action and the environment as priority in the economic recovery packages. But what I believe on that with the right political will, and as I mentioned before, climate change and the environmental issues are cross-sectoral issues, and therefore the addressing the environment and climate change issues should be also cross-sectoral. And here I reiterate what colleagues has already mentioned, that we need a collective action when we pursue the green recovery. We need collaboration between the government, the private sector, the NGOs, and the different stakeholders. We also need to engage with the citizens in the process. So the collective action is one of the things that we can focus on. The other thing is the raising the awareness, because I think although like we have seen the ambitions to pursue the green recovery in other parts of the world, I think there is the perception that views the climate action as a costly option. So I think it's really important to raise the awareness about the impacts of the climate change, as well as the co-benefits that can be gained from acting on climate. There are social, there are environmental, there are economic benefits of enhancing climate action and protecting the environment and pursuing the green recovery. And also, I think I'm joining the voice of Sarah here when she mentioned that we need to focus on innovation and on research and not just borrow the policies from abroad. I think, yes, we need to do more research, which is really specific for the MENA region, looking at the impacts of the climate change, but also looking at the specific co-benefits that can be gained from pursuing the green recovery. And there is not really a lot of research that have been done in the MENA region specifically.
Great, thank you, Aisha. That's very useful to know. And now we're kind of running out of time, but I've got a lot of questions from the audience. So the first one is a question for everyone, but I'd like to direct it first to Laila, if I may. Given the current generation's work on sustainability has to be continued by Generation Z and the younger generations, what role do you think can be played by organizations like Unilever in guiding younger people to understand and implement sustainability in personal and professional choices that they make?
Thank you, Tanzid, for the question. I think organizations like Unilever have a great role to play with regards to actually, again, creating that awareness on the importance for sustainable products. It's about boosting that cross-sectoral collaboration as well with other entities, and also getting the youth involved in really providing their innovative solutions to support corporate sectors continue along their route of a sustainable future strategy, essentially. And organizations like Unilever can also, again, help to support that transition towards creating a more conducive policy and regulatory environment by working closely with government entities and bringing together that youth voice there, improving the knowledge base, and really encouraging that movement in the long run.
Excellent. Does anyone else have a point on that question, point of view? Okay, all right, that's fine. Next question I have is for Sarah. Cradle to cradle is one of the great sustainability approaches and strategies. Based on your experience, have you seen this approach implemented to address energy issues?
That's a great question, because cradle to cradle, the process itself requires a deep understanding, not just of markets, but also a deep understanding of where things come from and where things go. Now, in our part of the region, which would be kind of a generic statement, we need more knowledge and data about where our sources come from and our resources.
Apologies, I'm not sure where there's some feedback coming. I don't have my kids in the room, so I don't know, someone might do, but apologies, carry on.
Yes, it's not mine for a change. So that's quite important. And also partnerships are very important in creating products that actually do tell the story of proper sourcing and where things come from and where things go. And this is another thing that that would be very important to look at. When it comes to energy and the supply of energy and the provision of energy, there is so much opportunity in the Middle East that we need to look at, and we need to rely on innovative solutions. And we also, like companies like Unilever, can create these partnerships of these knowledge hubs. Now, in traditional thinking, knowledge hubs are MSMEs, research labs, advocacy, people who work in that. But what I am always trying to say is there is a lot of information in our indigenous nomadic culture that we really need to put forward, and how things were made and how things were preserved, and the relationship between us as humans and the natural environment around us. And this is now the discussion all over the world. You know, how do we heal and how do we come back from a post-COVID era without actually repairing our relationship with nature? And that is the same principles that Cradle to Cradle is invested in. You know, so I think if that answers that, it's just a different paradigm, a shift in thinking about how we deal with our nature-based solutions and how we look at every product and analyzing it. And I think that was touched on at the beginning of this session about, you know, our consumer behavior.
Excellent, thank you. Mr. Khalid, I've got a question here for you. How can governments help in collection and compensation models for plastic waste to help achieve our plastic ambition?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, it's how can governments help with collection and compensation models to help minimize plastic waste?
Okay, well, we work with governments here in the UAE and now also in Saudi and Egypt. If I give the example of what we do here in the UAE, here in Sharjah, for example, we work very closely with the municipality in setting up legislation for waste management. And here, as I said earlier, we've achieved a diversion rate of 76%, which is the highest in the region, and that would have not been possible without the support of the government. So also the direction here in Sharjah, which is to reach zero waste. So again, that would have not been possible without the support of the government. We're seeing the same in the region, in Saudi and Egypt. In Egypt, for example, our target with the administrative capital is achieve a waste diversion rate of 80%. And again, that will require support from the government in terms of putting legislation into place. And that would go back to also looking at not just plastic, you know, we're looking at all the different types of waste and how to recover that waste, how to bring it back into the economy where nothing goes to waste.
Great, thank you, Khalid. Very clear. So, Dr. Aisha, I have a question here for you. Who are the key players within Saudi government when it comes to environment and social sustainability obviously is changing a lot as well. So it's
yeah, so thanks very much for the question. We do have different key players. We have the Ministry of the Energy, which is playing a role, and then we have the Ministry of the Economic and Planning, and the Ministry of the Environment, and these ministries actually cooperate with each other. They also cooperate with other entities that are involved in climate and environmental related issues, and even with the municipalities in the kingdom. So I'm currently doing some research in this area. But these are the key players that are playing a role in the kingdom. For the climate change specifically, I think the Ministry of the Energy is playing a bigger role in that area, but the Ministry of the Environment and Water and Agriculture is playing a role in covering the different environmental issues, like the water, the food security, desertification, the air quality, and also the meteorology. And the Ministry of the Economic and Planning is actually pretty much involved in overseeing the implementation of the SDGs in the kingdom. It's playing an important role in that area, but it also coordinates with other entities as well.
excellent. Thank you, Aisha. If I may ask a question related as a follow-up on this, I don't know, I'm sure a lot of people might have seen this in the news a few days ago. The Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the chair of NEOM, announced the development of the NEOM line, a city to have 1 million people living there by 2030. He announced aiming for zero carbon, circular carbon economy, zero waste. So do you see an increasingly important role for these kind of giga projects in Saudi Arabia towards as a player?
Is this question for me?
Yes, yes.
Sure. So I think with the mega cities, zero carbon cities, I think the idea is to create an example where we could see the sustainability and the environmentally friendly investments are happening really on the ground. And what that could help in the long run, it could help bringing the example for the other cities, either within the kingdom itself or in the region. So I think it's a good idea, and I think it can bring useful lessons for the other cities. But I would like to hear
Excellent.
from
And
colleagues
obviously,
if you have an idea.
and obviously it contributes to the diversification of the economy as well. So it's all part of that Vision 2030 in Saudi Arabia, isn't it? Okay, great. I think we've reached the end of our time, actually. So I'd like to firstly just thank all of the panelists for all of the excellent remarks and comments that you've made. You were very clear and concise, but also gave a lot of hope and optimism, I think, for the opportunity for this region to build back better. I'd like to show the poll results next, please, if we could. Results, please. I can't see. Oh, great. Well, there you go. So who should take the lead in the MENA region for a green recovery? All of the above is a unanimous win, whereas you have government at 10%, corporates and individuals at 3%. I would like to kind of add something on this, a caveat. When you say everyone should take the lead, usually no one does. So I would say it's more a message around the importance of partnership is absolutely crucial, and that's what came through from this panel today. The importance of government leadership in this region is crucial, and as we're seeing in the post-COVID economic stimulus package announcements, it's all coming from government announcements to stimulate their economy, but to help actually support the private sector in building back better and greening their development plans as well. So that partnership between the government and the private sector is crucial. And obviously, non-profit organizations have a really important role to play, as they're an important touch point with communities and individuals to try and inspire to change what they're doing. So we've heard a lot of really great comments. I'm not going to try and summarize everything that people have said, but it leaves me with a lot of hope and optimism for the future of this region in terms of a green recovery and the potential that it has. So thank you again to the panelists, Laila, Aisha, Khalid, and Sarah. Very much appreciated for all of your efforts. And now I'd like to hand over to Priya to take on to the next part of the session. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Tanzid, for a very smooth session, and our extreme thanks to Khalid, Laila, Sarah, and Dr. Aisha. I think, this extended discussion, what it really did was kind of bring to life, what a green recovery means in MENA, kind of bring the theory that was, presented by the earlier presenters, into focus for the MENA region. I'd now like to move forward to our next session. And one of the key objectives for Unilever today is to engage the youth of our region by providing them with a platform to amplify their opinions and suggestions towards creating a sustainable planet. And today is the start of a series of events and initiatives, the details of which will be announced at the end of today's events. So do keep a ear out for that announcement. Having said that, the COVID-19 crisis has had a huge impact on youth in terms of education, employment, their mental health, as well as obviously income levels. Now, the youth and future generations will not only shoulder many of the long-term economic and social consequences of this crisis, while having to deal with several complex problems from poverty to climate change that already exist. It's therefore imperative that the youth are kept at the core of this conversation as we readapt and rebuild. Moreover, as we've been increasingly seeing, today's youth are no longer passive listeners, but showcasing globally a strong will in pushing governments, businesses, and communities towards taking climate action. So our next panel brings together several youth activists from across the region to share their experiences, their insights and thoughts as to how youth can take a leading role in this green recovery agenda. This panel is being moderated by Stephen King, lecturer at Middlesex University in Dubai. So over to you, Stephen. Please take it forward.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you very much, Priya. And I'd just like to echo everybody else who has given their thanks to Unilever for the invitation and the honor of participating in this very important event. And I am personally very happy to be with at least two of my current heroes from the youth activism and advocacy movements from around the world. I think we have some audience participation to begin with. So if I could just ask our wonderful technical team to put forward with the poll question. So we have this great question: are MENA youth motivated to take action to address climate issues? And you've got about 45 seconds to give us an answer on that. And at the same time, I will just repeat that if you have questions for our panel, please feel free to type them into the chat box at any moment, and we will be keeping a track of those as we go through it. Now, we've heard fantastic content, fantastic ideas from our earlier sessions, but we need energy to get these ideas into reality. And I'm delighted to bring on board 4 fantastic young people who have all of this energy and ambition and leadership skills, who are here to inspire not just the young people, but the older people as well, on how we can make this world a better place. So if I could just have the panelists' pictures, please. Great. And as I introduce you, we'll just do a quick mic test. Just say hi for me, just so that everybody can hear you. So first of all, we have Kekeshan Basu, who has a LinkedIn bio about as long as my arm, and she still hasn't updated it just from this year. On her achievement, she is a Forbes 30 under 30, a United Nations Human Rights Champion, winner of 2016 International Children's Peace Prize, the founder and president of Green Hope Foundation, which was founded here in the UAE, and Kekeshan is a wonderful product of the UAE education system. So that's fantastic. She's been working in the fields of sustainability for 12 years, and she's not that old. If you take that numbers off, you will see when she started at a very young age. And she's currently operational across 25 countries. She just received the Nation Builder Award in Thailand last week. Kekeshan, would you like to say hi for us? Just test your mic.
Hello, everyone, and very happy to be here today.
Good, and I'm just going diagonally right down to Juan Pablo, who, that doesn't sound like a very Middle Eastern name, but he is a very special guest here as well. He is a youth policy and climate activist and advocate, and he was perhaps one of the first UN youth representatives from the UN civil society meetings in Korea, and he has since led numerous climate youth events, coming up with declarations all across, back from Korea all the way back to the US over the past 4 years. He is also now a spokesperson for Education USA, and he continues to advise the Youth Representative Steering Committee for the UN Department of Global Communications, and he's really here to give us a global perspective on what youth can do in getting involved with policymakers. Juan Pablo, welcome.
Yes, thank you, Steve, for that introduction, and thank you to everybody for being here today.
And we also have from North Africa, the co-founder and president of World Merit, Morocco, Mohammed Lahmimi, who is also an engineer, I see from his biography. He's a youth mobilization and community building enthusiast, and he's been working with the youth for the last 8 years in different structures and forms. I think he's also involved in sustainable investments. So, Mr. Mohammed, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Hey, hello everyone. It's a pleasure to be here.
And finally, and not least, we have Egypt's representative, Saad Ahmed, who's the president of AIESEC in Egypt, and he's leading 14 different teams of volunteers in 6,000 exchanges. He has 1,500 volunteers that he looks after and supports. I think that is just a fantastic group of people, and I'm really looking forward to what we're going to hear from them today. So I'm going to start off with ladies first. And so Kekeshan, Green Hope, I think, is probably one of the oldest environmental activism and advocacy groups here out of the Middle East region, probably. And so from your experience of 12 years, what do you see? Are youth taking action to make a positive difference in the communities and to safeguard the environment?
Yes, I do think that. And, the impacts of climate change have always disproportionately affected those who are least responsible for it. And the world's largest industrialized economies that are the main polluters and emitters of greenhouse gases and their impacts are felt, of their actions are felt elsewhere in the world, the MENA region included. And within these affected communities, it's those who are vulnerable and marginalized that are impacted the most, foremost amongst them young girls and young people. So it's key to look at climate change from the human lens of climate justice, because it exacerbates the already existing opportunity gap that's pushing us young people further behind and deeper into the mire. But the biggest problem, unfortunately, is that now young people have also only been typecast as protesters, but just striking and protesting will not solve the climate crisis. And what works in the West isn't relevant in the MENA region, especially across North Africa, where millions don't have access to even basic education, food, or clean water. So localization of solutions of the Sustainable Development Goals at the grassroots level is crucial. And as someone who works at a grassroots level with children and youth, focusing on these vulnerable communities, Syrian refugees, migrant youth, and those who are economically challenged, I have witnessed universally that youth are genuinely concerned about the environment. And honestly, they take to it far more instinctively as compared to adults who often tokenize us and view our capability to bring about positive ground level change with skepticism, which is sad. But honestly, all we need are education and equal opportunities. And just citing Green Hope Foundation, we've planted over 142,000 trees to stop land degradation, regenerated 5,000 square kilometers of fragile mangrove ecosystems, and through our environment academies, we provide sustainability education to over 130,000 young people. And young people are making an impact daily, even if it doesn't make the media headlines that only likes to focus on these protests. So what we now need is that mindset change that acknowledges the unique challenges that regions face and then recognizes the localized ground level actions that are being taken by youth beyond the West, such as those youth in the MENA region.
That's great. And I see Juan Pablo nodding his head there. You brought up some great themes there of Kakkar, of climate justice, of young people being typecast and stereotyped into certain roles. Juan Pablo, I know this is your personal passion project, is to get young people into more senior positions. Can you give us your ideas on how young people can do more than just strike and protest, and how can they get involved, and how can companies help them?
Yes, thank you, Steve. I believe that there is a great deal of young people in the MENA region that are taking action to address climate change. However, I think that there is a need for youth groups and private companies and academic institutions, to play a high role in developing new strategies to address the challenges that detriment our environment. And I think we should not forget that that as my fellow panelists, I believe, would think is that young people in the MENA region and in any other regions in the world still lack access to basic information and the resources necessary to successfully develop their potential. So I think there is a great deal of importance that we need to give these kind of conversations with private companies and private institutions that they need to play a higher role. They need to play a more important role because they have the resources, they have the capability to give these young people the platform necessary to develop themselves and to be able to really have an impact on the environment. So we must also address that those issues, when we talk about these issues, we need to understand also the specific realities of each community, and to be able to understand that we need to go to the field. We need to actually understand at the grassroots levels how young people are taking action to climate change and how can we help them empower and amplify those voices on the field. And I think that that's the way we can give youth the crucial tools to make impact and in their communities and in the region in general.
That's brilliant. And so let's hear exactly what the young people are doing in these areas. Mohammed, World Merit, tell us, what are you doing in Morocco? What are the young people working on, or what are you hoping to drive them into? What projects are you hoping to inspire?
So I would like to thank you for these questions, Steve, because I think it's a yes that the youth are now understand the impact, but not just that, they're starting to see it as one of the opportunities actually to drive projects, to create startups, and coming from both of the perspectives of working in an NGO and volunteering world and working with youth on that frame, and then again working together with them at Team6P in supporting startups and entrepreneurs, we've seen a lot of projects that emerge out of those problems that we see that are tackling climate change. We see that people are now like turning into basic stuff from recycling and recycling waste and waste management into other solutions that are about more in the climate as a whole, from the ideas that we're seeing cleaning beaches to other ideas that are in terms of water and sustainability. And for that gives us the right impression to see that they are in the middle of it, and they are actually understanding its importance, and especially based on the concrete things that we saw now that are in Morocco, for example, and all over Africa, from water problems that are now because of either the heat waves or just now for the pollution in our major cities. So they are taking action, and we've seen it from small actions to big actions like hackathons and enterprises and companies that are coming out of this. But the importance here is that, and as Aisha mentioned, is that we do not need to copy past like the solutions, but moreover we need solutions that are adapted to our current situations. And we're Africa, and especially like coming from Morocco, we know that we have such an opportunity to create like behaviors and to create like solutions that from scratch, because we are at the very beginning of our like I would say revolution in Africa. And doing that, we have this beautiful opportunity of building, not just like recycling or not just changing the behavior, but building behaviors. And for that we need more of like youth to come together and structured, and more of to be taken seriously, as Juan mentioned, into the decision-making process, not just consulting or involving, but more of bringing them into the table.
It's great. So let's finally, last but not least, we go to Saad in Egypt. And you mentioned the importance of not copy-paste, Mohammed, but of actually creating local solutions. Saad, we had one of the previous panelists, I think it was Ms. Sarah, said that heat is a problem in Egypt. I don't think anyone would deny that. But I also think water, which is Mohammed's point, is also a key point, which I've personally been involved in. What are young people in Egypt doing for climate action?
Thank you, Stephen, for the question. Yeah, I really believe that the level of awareness and understanding of youth in the MENA region have been increasing a lot in the past couple of years, and this realization comes from what we are doing here in ISIC. We as ISIC believe that we should place our confidence in youth, as they are the only key to unlock a better future. And over the last 5 years, more than 100,000 students only from the MENA region participated in our global volunteer program, which is mainly working on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, such as no poverty, quality education, climate action, gender equality, and more. And this is actually a proof that our youth in the MENA region really wants to drive a change and impact. But what I believe that is still missing is the collaboration between us and organizations and initiatives such as Green Hope, World Merit, and ISIC, in order to make this impact and contribution to the whole globe better and bigger.
That's very interesting. You need more collaboration, and that echoes perhaps our previous panel, the poll question, of saying who's responsible. But Saad, I'm going to stick with you. What support and skills, apart from, well, you mentioned support, what support and skills do the youth actually need? What specifics do you think that they need to help build this sustainable economy?
Okay, so from my point of view, I believe that there are main 4 things that youth needs to have in order to drive more sustainable economy. First of all, sufficient knowledge about sustainability and how to translate it into successful business strategy. Secondly, the ability to innovate in sustainable approaches and technology. Thirdly, the ability to inspire change and empower a range of people within your organization to make sustainable business decisions. And finally, the ability to have a long-term vision for how the organization will contribute to sustainable economy. And I believe that we need the support of our government and different stakeholders in order to make sure that this kind of skills or knowledge are being transmitted to the youth. So I believe that we need to work on main 3 things. First of all, we need to make sure that we are educating our children about the principle of sustainability since they were young, and we are making sure that it's one of their habits. We need to drive more opportunities to use to have more talks and discussion about sustainability and its practices. And finally, we need to support organizations and initiatives that are working on sustainable solutions and give them the right effort and the right capabilities in order to make sure that they are achieving their vision.
That's brilliant. So thank you very much for that, Saad. I'm going to push back up to Mohammed. We'll go reverse back through the path. Mohammed, a similar kind of question, but what is the role that needs to be played by the stakeholders, including the government, businesses, and academia? We each need to play a role, but what exactly is that role in your perspective?
Thank you so much, and that's such a brilliant question, Steve. But I just want to mention something that is very important before, is that we and to put in place in here is that we are the youth. Our generation now is best positioned to make change, and for that we need that to be understood by all the stakeholders around the table in the ecosystem, like by the corporates, by the government, and by the youth themselves, because of now we have like seen such a development in the technology and everything. And we've done a study in World Minute Morocco that to answer that question, to ask youth, like, what do you basically need? Like, because many times when you ask, like, what does like a young person who wants to make an action need, we go to like that, we think it's a funding, or we think it is like just a job or anything, but more of like, we found that 3 fundamental things that they need, which is like, they need to be inspired, and that's the most thing. And that inspiration comes from the exchange in between generations, between us and the older generation, because we understand there is a huge knowledge there that needs to be transferred. And there is another level of inspiration in terms of the level of youth themselves, like between us, like getting inspired from other solutions that are out there and other collaborating on that level as well. So that's the very first point, which is the inspiration. And the second thing, which is that we go a little deeper, which is the connection between the youth themselves. So you need to be connected ourselves, and now like events like this and other opportunities and platforms provide that such a solution. So the connections, and not just among youth, but in the same time among like the other support organizations to the government, to be in the same table to connect and talk and to be taken seriously. And then the third point, then we come to the support. So and that's very interesting, because the support did not come as a first in this study. It came as a third point, that we need to be first inspired and connected, then to be supported, and then to work together and collaborate. And then the fourth point is that once we have like something that works, and we have either a collaboration, either a project, then we come to the point of showcasing that, and showcasing that impact that came out of the collaboration. And for that end, it's mostly like the most important thing now, as we say, it's not the lack of initiatives that are working, it's not the lack of projects or actions that is working, but more of it's the lack of organized action and us coming together to mobilize. And there is nothing compared, if we can say so, that and then a group of people, in terms of the impact, I mean, that a group of people coming together and working together and collaborating. And we've seen it work and basically here in Morocco, we've seen that our actions have increased like 300% just by collaborating as young among us itself, like first with other initiatives. And Saad mentioned this by like between organizations collaboration, that it's very needed. So to sum up, I think those 3 points and four points of inspiration and connection, then like the support and the showcase are very important, and that what drives that collaboration. If we base them on these 4 principles, that collaboration comes out like organically in between youth and government and companies in a way.
That's amazing. And I think going through those 4 points, I'm looking at Kakkar here and thinking, you know, this is what you've brought to so many countries in terms of creating this great youth international network of young people who are able to work together. Now, to do that, it wasn't easy, I'm sure. What were the challenges that you have faced in actually building out that kind of a network for young people to come together and to deal with climate issues?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that specifically to the MENA region, I think MENA is a very unique region because on one hand, we have abundant energy resources, while at the same time, we are also severely challenged by being one of the world's hotspots in terms of regional war and strife. And as a consequence, the region faces one of the highest rates of migration in the world that's accelerated not only by war, but also due to wide economic disparities between nations that acts as the stimulus for migration. And we also have an increasingly young population that provides policymakers with the immense opportunity of generating demographic dividends if investments are put in place in the human capital of children and young people, and thereby enhancing their prospects for productive employment and education. But the regional instability and the consequent migration poses severe challenges to stable education and consequently for employment and growth opportunities. So I feel that this is the greatest challenge that prevents youth engagement in not just climate change mitigation, but holistically in all sustainability issues, and not just the MENA region, but actually globally. And I think that the single key change that's required to address this issue is the implementation of sustainability education as a formal part of the curriculum in schools. And here we also require government corporate partnerships that foster sustainability education using civil society actors to complement these learnings to translate into actions on the ground. And education for sustainable development is crucial for bringing about this behavioral change. And at Green Hope Foundation, our advocacy is based on the mantra of education for sustainable development because it provides that transformative impetus for imparting the skills, knowledge, and attitudes to think and act for a sustainable future. And the UAE is an excellent example of this integration because apart from being a leader in implementing sustainability education through collaboration with civil society, stakeholders like Green Hope Foundation, we work very closely with school boards in the UAE, partnering with them to raise awareness and actually create action on the ground. And while youth engagement is extremely important, we must also address the specific needs to enhance the engagement of girls and young women, because even here, it's education that'll help to remove the biases that impede the meaningful participation of girls and women, because they too are disproportionately affected by climate change. And once again, this is not just specific to MENA region, but globally. So education for sustainable development is really the key to solving the challenges and ensuring that we're able to move ahead.
Brilliant. And I think, glad for mentioning the migration, I think there is a very good NGO called Education Cannot Wait, which is acting on those who are, and the young people who are in that situation. Perhaps we also need sustainable education cannot wait to press on with that. Now, I want to take on to Juan Pablo. We talked about education and challenges at that level, but once we've got the education, challenges remain, I think you would agree. How do young people, once they've got the education, then get into those positions to actually make an impact? And what are the challenges that they may face, and how can companies help them to move there?
Well, I think if we speak in let's say in a broader spectrum, I think that young people in the MENA region face very similar challenges to engage in sustainability issues as young people in other regions. When we talk about access to resources, to development opportunities, to even unemployment, I think two key steps towards involving young people in decision makers, it's first, we need to foster partnerships between sectors. And now that we have this conversation, which I'm very glad we're having with Unilever, is to, have these conversations with private companies on how many young people are actually in the decision-making table in your company. Is there anyone under 32 that is on your high-level position in your company? If there is not, maybe there is something we need to discuss here. And it's the fact that you cannot solve these 21st century problems with people that are not from this century, people that are aware, that understand the realities and the problems of this century. I think we need to bring young people to be in these high-level positions to be able to understand how to address these problems. It's kind of including all the sustainability issues and any other issue in the world. And so I think the two steps goes first with the partnerships between sectors, of course, including private companies, government, international organizations, academia, to give the necessary access and opportunities to youth. And also the other step is understanding, again, the realities of young people in every community. So before we even give out solutions or alternatives or action points to certain regions in the world, we need to first understand what's going on in every place. And I think all my fellow panelists have mentioned some of this, and it's just that we can't talk about youth without youth, or we can take action to help youth without youth including in this action point. So it's just those are just very simple 2 steps, but I think they are very necessary during this time in 2021.
It's great. There's great questions to pose, and I'm sure there's people now questioning themselves about those things. Now, we have a short video of some examples of projects that are happening here in the region, and then we have a lot of questions from our delegates. So if I can just ask the technical team to share the video, please.
Way before COVID happens, youth in the MENA regions understand the problems that they will face in the future. That's why they have to take things on their own hands to request for the improvements of governance, transparency, security, health, education, and also job opportunities.
Our recent research has shown that the current crisis has awakened young people to the risk of new diseases emerging, and the havoc that that's caused is really alarming evidence of that undeniable link between nature and human health.
Growing up in a digital world characterized by advanced technologies and information sharing, we are harnessing this opportunity to advocate, lobby, and lead campaigns towards environmentally friendly policies and practices.
Students making more sustainable choices that will minimize any negative impact they have on the environment.
Gen Z is what I think to be the most proactive generation yet. Hence the many environmentally friendly projects and campaigns out there.
What is still lacking today is the shift from the awareness that is spreaded digitally and accessible to everyone to concrete the actions or the solutions that can make difference in people's life.
In the past few years, students have risen to the occasion of fighting for the planet and requesting change from their government. The youth of today are heavily involved in advocating for the climate crisis over any other global issue. And with the constant push of government and corporate change, we will be able to see a healthier and more vibrant planet.
A little round of applause to everyone there. I think it was extremely inspiring. So we have the Q&A, and I'm going to start off with a question for Saad, if that's okay. I've got here a question that, given that a majority of the population of MENA countries, such as Egypt, is young, how should climate action be presented or promoted to engaging the youth? What's your lessons there?
Sorry, Stephen, can you repeat the question?
Sure. Given that the majority of the population of the Middle East and North Africa countries, including Egypt, are youth, how should climate action be presented or promoted to engage people like yourself and your friends?
Yeah, like as I was mentioning in the first question, like youth here in Egypt, and I think in the all over the MENA region wants really to change and contribute to the global issues and their country's issues. But the thing that we need to know, how can we present the issues for them? How can we let them feel ownership to the issue in order to make sure that they are working on it and contributing to solve it? So the thing is, they need to feel that it's their problem, not only the other people's problem, because we always feel the diffusion of responsibility. If I don't feel that this thing is my responsibility, I don't contribute to it. So what we need to work on in the upcoming period, that we need to make them feel that this is our responsibility as youth. This is the time for us to stand as a youth in these countries and contribute and drive impact in our countries.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you very much, sir. Now, we heard from Mr. Sanjiv earlier how Unilever was understanding that the consumer is becoming increasingly socially aware. Mohammed, though, I want to just come to you and ask you about this. Given that people are becoming more aware of how big companies affect the climate, are youth and consumers, do you think, in Morocco or Northern Africa region, are they becoming more aware, and are they becoming more active in the choice of products that they're buying?
I think, yes, I think there is this awareness, such of awareness in terms of like consuming, and yeah, and we've seen that in many movements in Morocco that happened. There were like, there was a sense of community of like, I would say boycotting a certain product because of certain like things. So, and we've seen that in Morocco, that the consumers now are using the power given to them by their like power of buying to actually like change things and make like certain like decisions made, or like make their voices heard. And that's something that we've seen lately in Morocco, and especially the last couple of years, that where the people are now not just like consuming and just consuming because they need things, but they're starting to make those like reasonable choices in terms of what they make and whatnot and other things. We've seen other movements that are more green and more climate friendly in terms of like their lifestyles, not just in consumption but in other options. So I think that's very, yes, and I'm very happy to see these kind of changes in behaviors in the Moroccan society and the African society as a whole.
It's great stuff. So there's a question here about education, Kakkar. So I'll give you a chance to address this again because this was your particular topic. Do you think teaching civics at school will help influence the youth's opinion of global warming and to be more mindful and active in working towards living sustainably? I think it might be a yes or no answer, but you can. Then let me ask you another question. As a teacher, as an educator, how should I be teaching you?
Well, I definitely think that civics is very important, and what we need to understand about education for sustainable development is that it is multidisciplinary. It requires different areas and fields of knowledge to come together. And speaking to you as an educator, I would say that teaching your students about global issues and then bringing that to the local level and addressing the local challenges in that way is extremely important. And definitely whichever field of study is most relevant to what is going on at the local level, it's extremely important that children and youth are taught about that, and at the same time they're taught empathy so that they're able to not just sympathize with others, but they actually don't sympathize with others, but actually take action to address those issues. So I would say that any field of study that promotes this whole holistic education is extremely beneficial in the field of sustainability education.
Good. And we're starting to hear little messages saying that we're almost at the end of time. I do think we should have this little message in every corporate headquarters to say we're almost out of time on environmental strategies as well. I think that'd be really helpful. But I'm going to ask Juan Pablo the question, if you can combine that into your closing remarks as well. How would you recommend the youth who have graduated in unrelated majors to get involved? So if you haven't got a science or a STEM related degree, how can they get involved in this climate push, or what should they be doing? I know you have many different ideas.
I think it's this is an issue that includes everybody and affects everyone, no matter your field of work or the kind of involvement that you've had for all these years. It doesn't really matter, because climate change does not make any distinctions. Everyone will be affected by these problems. So, and has been affected by these problems. So in any field of work that you are in, you could contribute in one way or another. And that's a conversation I usually have with many young people, is that, well, I'm working on this field that it seems so unrelated to sustainability. What can I do? But in reality, there's always a connection, because if you looked in, for example, to the SDGs, to the Sustainable Development Goals, there is going to be a specific target within those goals that would be strictly related to your field of work. So what I would say is that there's always something that you could contribute, no matter what your background is. And also that in every step of the way, in every action that you take, it could be either at home, it could be in your everyday life, you are contributing to climate change, and you're contributing to either amplify climate change or either combating climate change. So be aware and be mindful that every day, every time that you make an action, it might be either good or bad for the environment. So I think it doesn't make any distinction. And I would also say that conversations like this that Unilever is having is something that we need to keep continuing, and we need to keep fostering, because when we include private companies, which are the ones that have, that are very, very responsible in many ways to creating this detriment to the environment, it means that there are companies out there, powerful companies, that are actually given the platform necessary to, be more environmentally friendly. So I think this is a great conversation, and we need to keep the other companies involved and bring it into these kind of discussions.
It's great. I love the Spider-Man quote, with great power comes great responsibility. Now, we've got to finish this off. Mohammed, Saad, and Kakkar, we've got all of these people watching us here, all the young people and all the companies. One thing that they need to do as soon as we finish this, or in the next couple of months, what's the first action they should be doing? I'll start with Mohammed, if that's okay. What's the one thing you want them to be doing?
I think we are at an age where young people are very needed. So, and there is a very large amount of opportunities out there. So the very most important one thing that I would need is for us to be prepared for those opportunities, to collaborate, to reach out, to act. And you cannot act without being prepared, and meaning be prepared in terms of being equipped with the skills and the knowledge to act and to do things. So go get prepared and stay ready for any opportunity. Once it's there, you're gonna grab it. So that's the very thing. And since we're in the sharing of the opportunities, there is one that is for climate now that we have here in Morocco. It's by youth for youth. It's an African youth climate hub that is open now for applications if you want to join and work on climate, but here in Morocco, and it's open for everyone.
It's brilliant. And Saad, I can grant you anything that you like. What would it be?
I think, again, I'll be capitalizing and stressing on the point of collaboration. We need collaboration in order to make our impact bigger and better. I just want to emphasize on the idea of being a global citizen, a citizen who wants to contribute not only for his family, society, and country, but also for the whole globe. We always have our ownership to our country or our company or our society, but at a certain time we need to stand and claim our accountability and responsibility as youth to drive that change and impact not only in our country, but all over the whole world.
Claiming your rights and standing up. That's fantastic. And Kakkar, you have the last word.
I began my advocacy at the age of 7, and a quote that inspired me then and continues to inspire my work and Green Hope's work is the quote by Robert Swan, whose words, "The greatest threat to our planet is the belief that someone else will save it," has never been more relevant than it is today. So the one thing that I would like to urge everyone to do is ask yourself, what have I done to help my planet and my community? And your conscience will give you the answer, and that will prompt you to step out of your comfort zone and bring about positive change.
That's absolutely wonderful. Thank you very much. It's very inspirational, and I'm so grateful again to have the chance to see you and all the other panelists. Thank you very much, Mohammed. Thank you very much, Saad. Thank you very much, Kakkar. Thank you very much, Juan Pablo. We're just going to show the results of the panel, of the poll question earlier. Let's see what they are. Are MENA youth motivated to take action to address climate change? 70% yes and 30% say no. Well, let's hope that that has changed, and I'm sure it has as a result of this presentation. Now, I'm just going to close up. We've had some really fantastic talks today, and I was really, really inspired by all of the different speakers. Specifically, if we go back right to the beginning, where we were talking about the importance of the interdependency of health and the environment, I think that is a message which I think is really important. So I was really inspired by that from this morning, and I think that was carried through in the conversations that we've heard from the youth. But most importantly, the young people have mentioned the need for education in order that they can be prepared to address the issues of climate change, that when companies such as Unilever and others open the door, that they are able to go through and take up on those fantastic employment opportunities to help build a more sustainable world. I also think that education from an education provider is not just the responsibility of formal education. there are structural issues to getting sustainability into curricula, and those will be fought for and they will advance. But the COVID-19 pandemic has proven that there are quicker ways of educating and in building positive behaviors, whether that's in the form of stickers and posters and advertising and public awareness campaigns. So I think in that respect, we all a responsibility for educating everyone, helping to equip the young people and everybody else with the skills to address climate change. And finally, I've discovered that in Arabic, and we're in this region, the word for human beings is Khalifa, which is pronounced Khalifa, which is a unisex word name. And depending on the dialect in the country, it means deputy, guardian, friend of the earth, viceroy, or steward. And it's also the name of one of my very good friends back at the Tislat group when I was working there. And I just thought that let us all take that on board. Let's take those spirits on board of being this guardian and the steward for the planet. Let's give it a hug and a health check now and then and work together to really create a good future for everyone everywhere around the world. And on that note, I will thank again Priya and everyone at Unilever for inviting us to be part of this event, and I'll hand over.
Thank you, Stephen. And it was an absolute pleasure to hear one Kakkar Mohammed Saad, their very articulate opinions and voices. Echoing, Stephen, what you said, education doesn't sit merely within institutions, and I'm hoping that the discussion today was an education in itself, and it will motivate young people, to take further action. And jumping from exactly that point, I would now like to spend just the last few moments of our event to announce our upcoming student engagement activities. Because if you remember, what I did mention was that one of the key objectives of today's events was to try and see how we can continue to engage the MENA youth in our objective of making sustainable living commonplace. And this event was merely the start. We are now going to get into, post this event, we are now going to be launching a photo competition. It's titled My Sustainable City. Our objective is to get young people to look around their cities, their communities, and identify that one cause that they would like to address within their communities. We'd encourage them that in order to take part in the competition, what they will be required to do is take a picture and support it with a 500-word essay to highlight exactly why this particular cause is important to them and a brief outline of how they would like to address it. We will then take a look at all of the entries, identify the top 10, support those top 10 entries with mentors in order for them to crystallize further their action plan. And then the top 3 winners will actually get monetary rewards to take their or to translate the thought into action. So that's really the first competition. The second is an article writing competition that is focused on students of communication and journalism. And the objective is to encourage them to put pen to paper and use the power of the written word to drive an increased awareness and engagement on sustainability issues in MENA. We will again find the top few winners based on their entries and engage them further with regards to their chosen field. And our third and final engagement will be 4 interactive sessions that we will aim to host from mid-February onwards on different areas of sustainable development. I think one of the things that really came out loud and strong from all of the panelists, youth panelists, was the need for more capacity ability building. And that's exactly the objective of these awareness sessions, where we will bring in experts, both from within Unilever and also from the outside, and aim to raise awareness on certain areas of sustainable development. So anybody who's interested in any of the above, we request them to register their interest in participating from 17th of January at our website. This is the same website that they used to register their interest in attending today's event. And I would also request everybody to follow us on our social media. There's no need to look for any links. What we will be doing post this event is to actually send all attendees a thank you note. You will, in that thank you note, again receive the same link as well as the links to our social media. So we'd love for you to follow our social media, interact with us through our social media, and keep up to date on how you can participate in the above three events. And so before I thank all of the speakers, panelists, and participants for staying with us so long, what we would like to do is take a group shot of all attendees. And so if I can please request you all to put on your videos, look into the camera, wave, say hi, whatever you like, and just give us a little bit of time, but stay online. So over to the technical team now, please. Yeah. Can I speak? So thank you everyone for staying with us. I know it was a bit of a long event, but really very grateful to all of you for your time. Do continue to engage with Unilever. We remain committed to actually developing the capability of the youth, engaging with you much further. And like I mentioned earlier, our social media is probably the best way to get in touch with us. We do promise that we do monitor our social media, and we do reply to every request, engagement request that we do get. So thank you and goodbye. Stay well, stay safe. Thank you.